Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, our show about new releases and the authors that bring them to us. And tonight we've got a whole lot of people with a whole lot of new books coming out the door. So everybody's going to be loading up that to-be read pile. But before we dive into the party, I am Jim Nettles. I'm going to be your host this evening. And we're going to go around and let everybody introduce themselves. Nancy, we're going to let you go first.
Oh, goody. I'm Nancy Dunne. In my day job life, I am a sign language interpreter working for a university, but I am also a writer, and I write mostly fantasy, elves, and dwarves and things, and have only recently branched out into what I call steampunk adjacent. I'm no Patrick Dugan, but I'm working on it.
Marx?
Hey, I'm Marx Pyle, co-host of the podcast Genretainment. I have a film degree, so I worked in film for about 10 years or so, and then I wanted to write some stuff that didn't have a budget. So got my MFA and I write in fiction, urban fantasy, and science fiction.
Lee?
I'm Lee Modesitt, and I guess I'm the old man in this crew. My first story was published in 1973, and right now I've got, I guess it's 5 fantasy series and 3 or 4 science fiction series, and got a new release that's coming out shortly.
David?
I'm David R. Slayton. I'm the author of the Adam Binder novels, which are urban fantasy published by Blackstone Press. I write urban fantasy right now, but I also write epic, science fiction, mystery. I dabble in a lot of things, but right now I've got, those out.
Janet?
Hi, I'm Janet Walden-West, and I write paranormal and contemporary romance and urban fantasy. And I also just picked up David's book today.
Is it signed?
It's not signed. This is terrible.
You can make that happen. You're going to make me blush, though.
And Elle-Marie?
Hi, I'm Elle-Marie Wood. I'm a psychological horror author. I pretty much only write psychological horror, though my most recent release is actually a sci-fi light mashup with horror, so maybe I shouldn't say that. That's going to be coming out really, really soon, in fact.
So let's talk a little bit about these new releases and the fun that we're going to bring to our readers, and occasionally a little bit of torment and torture. So Nancy, why don't you tell us a little bit about that new release?
I was gonna say, I asked earlier if I'm just gonna sit here and like hold my book because I'm kind of in love with it. I've just gotten the proof copy and I just think it's beautiful. Strid is, as I said, steampunk adjacent. It is a retelling of Irish mythology, sort of. It's a retelling of what West Yorkshire might have been around the turn of the 20th century. It's a mystery. It has fairies. It has very large dogs in it. It has some steampunky elements, and it's just completely different than anything I've ever done because, like I said, most of what I do is epic fantasy and fantasy. And so this was just a, hey, let's see what happens. And so that's what happened.
So it's a steampunk adjacent mystery.
Yes. We have 2 characters, one of which is a tinkerer who likes to build things, and the other one is her sister. And they sort of, the sister likes to read, so she fancies herself kind of a Sherlock Holmes type that wants to solve mysteries. But then they find out that the mysteries that are causing the problems in their little village in West Yorkshire are a lot more paranormal than they are Holmesian. I guess that's the word. So very much, I was thinking about the Hound of the Baskervilles when I wrote it, and almost made that part of the name, but then I was like, that's really not what the Hound of the Baskervilles is about at all. It's just nifty because it's got Irish wolfhounds and bloodhounds in it. Hound, but not quite. So
yeah, I can't imagine why you'd be working wolfhounds into your stories.
I don't know. Maybe because I live with them and work with them at the Carolina Renaissance Festival and do all that stuff. But yeah, I had a really good model for my wolfhound character because I could just call her into my office and go, come here, let me see what your paws look like. So that is what Strid, the Strid is the underwater gorge that connects the human realm and the fairy realm. And in reality, it's a river in West Yorkshire that runs straight and then turns like this. So over the many, many, many years that this river has been running that way, it has sort of dug out the earth this way. And it's possibly, it's said to be the most dangerous place in the world, because if you step across it and you slip, you will get sucked down underneath and banged against rocks all the way down. So I thought, what better place to be somewhere that fairies can go that humans can't, so they can just kind of peek out. And there are lots of legends in Yorkshire about the fairy queen coming out of the Strid. So that's where that came from. And I'm serious. I'm just like sitting here petting it because I think it's so pretty.
It is very
And I'm
pretty.
so pleased that it turned out the way it did. So I always get that like that when I get my books, when I get the proof copy. I'm just like, oh, yeah. So that's me.
So what about you, Lee? What's the new one?
The new one is called Isolate. Let's see if I can put it up here. Sort of. Anyway, it is it's called a gas lamp political novel in a constitutional imperium where the only, should we say, fantastic thing is there are empaths and isolates. And empaths are obviously can project and control emotions, and isolates are immune to it. But the basic story is pretty much a political semi-thriller, semi-political intrigue novel, and it's the first of three. All three of them are done. The second one is Counselor. That'll be out next August. And the third one is Contrarian, and that won't be out until sometime in 2023. Now, I wish I had a book to show you, because although I was supposed to have a book by now, it turned out that Tor, my book, along with about 15 others, got pushed back several weeks because the printer didn't have enough people to print the books. So it's not going to be out for about 3 weeks. It should have been out by now.
Well, the good news is by the time this drops, it'll be just about ready to come out.
That's what I hoped. Actually, I hoped originally that it would be just out when this dropped.
Yeah,
And
you're not the only one having problems getting inventory in hand right now.
there was one sort of, there's a touch to this which was sort of sad and funny simultaneously, because it was going to be released on my birthday, and it isn't.
Well, you just get to delay the birthday a little bit.
Well, at my age, delaying birthdays is probably not a bad idea.
What about you, Marx?
So mine, I'm trying to figure out if I can put it on my background or not. Let's see here. That's not gonna look good. Sorry. Should have pre-planned this. Anyway, you can't really see that very well. Anyway, it's called Obsidian Monsters. And the reason I don't have a book cover yet is because it's on Kindle. So I decided to try out Kindle to launch it out and release each individual episode and get that feedback before I collect it in as a novel. So it's an urban fantasy series. It is like Mission Impossible meets urban fantasy, and there's a lead. It's actually an ensemble cast, so it's a little different than your normal urban fantasy. Cade is an agent, secret agent for his organization called Obsidian, and he has a magical relic, and he's a secret agent guy, action man. And but there's also a Maria Church, who's a demon hunter and is half demon, and a lot of people like that character too. And then I have like a were-jaguar character and a vampire and all that good stuff. So it's got vampires, fae, shifters, but I try to do a unique spin on everything in some way. And it's like a hidden world. So, the supernatural are kept secret, or the otherworldly is what they're called, because they're from other worlds, trapped here on Earth. And Cade has to put together his team to take out stop a threat that threatens the whole world. And we get to meet all these cool characters. Hopefully people think they're cool characters.
What about you, Dave?
Okay, so my book that's out today is Trailer Park Trickster, which is the second in the Adam Binder novels. First book, White Trash Warlock, came out this time last year. It's about a broke gay witch from Guthrie, Oklahoma, who has to travel to Denver, Colorado to save the city and possibly the world while reconnecting with his estranged family. So it's urban fantasy with a lot of rural. And at the end of White Trash Warlock, Adam received a cryptic warning that called him back to Guthrie. So Trailer Park Trickster is Adam's return to his roots. And while we had a victory at the end of Warlock, it was kind of Pyrrhic. People were lost. Bad things happened. So Adam is still smarting from that. And the warning is a shock. So he rushes home. But in his haste, he completely forgets to tell anyone, including the rookie cop / Grim Reaper, Vic Martinez, who he started a relationship with in the first book. Vic is rightly pissed, and so he chases after Adam, only his road trip to Oklahoma is hijacked by Argent, the Elven Queen of Swords. And if you've read the first book, these are two fan favorite characters that really play well together, and they're very mischievous. So Vic is in way more than he bargained for on his way to find Adam. And Trickster came out today, October 12th, in ebook, audio, and print from Blackstone.
What about you, Janet?
My current release is Agent Down, the second book in my Region 2 series. And one of my beta readers described it as dropping Gordon Ramsay into the middle of a Black Ops camp, which is pretty close. The first book starts with the hero who is a social media star, and he ends up running from a cryptid. This one is kind of like a Godzilla wannabe, let's call it. And he ends up signing on with the Region 2 team. And they are a lot of fun because all they know about civilian culture is what they've got from Netflix and rom-coms. So I've had a lot of fun with this book.
See, when you said Gordon Ramsay and a junior Godzilla, I'm picturing a sushi chef. That's just what came to mind.
That would be too perfect.
You can use that for number 3. So what about you, Lisa? What you got?
So my new release, which is actually coming out tomorrow, I said soon, but I looked at the clock and realized it's the 13th is tomorrow. I don't know how I missed that date today, but yeah, so Cacophony is book 2 of my Realm series, which of course I'm wearing my shirt saying the Realm. The first book in the series came out around this time last year, and it starts off basically in an afterlife that no one could have ever anticipated. It's not even like it's a collection of mythology. It is something wholly new that no one wants and no one could ever have expected to be, reality. And so this father has to try and determine how to save the rest of his family from ending up where he is. And so it's a battle for his family's souls while he's in the afterlife and they're living, blissfully ignorant on earth, but, moving quickly towards this inevitable end. Book 2 picks up where that one left off, and he unfortunately lost the battle of saving his son at the end of that, which is okay. I mean, it works because we need some help as we move into book 2 to save the rest of the brood. And this one is just a really interesting connection between, the afterlife and, those of the living, but it brings in vampire lore, it brings in, immortal beings, and it's just talk about having fun with the book. That was a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, you're dealing with religious horror, you're dealing with, of course, vampires, which are fantastic. Who doesn't love a vampire? And, I had a lot of time to play around with those characters and really make them come to life. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we just replayed the special from the Realm launch last year where you had a long conversation with your friend there.
Yes,
just
he's
reran
a priest.
that.
He's a priest, and so he gave his thoughts about the afterlife, which it was a really interesting conversation. So yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about these stories and where they came from, what kind of brought you, inspired you to dive into these. So Lee, we'll start with you, kind of coming into that nice psycho-political thriller. What kind of brought you to starting on that one at this time?
Well, that comes out of my background. I spent almost 20 years in Washington, D.C., first as a legislative director for a congressman, then as staff director for a successor. And I ran congressional affairs at EPA under the Reagan administration, and then did environmental consulting. And one of the things that over the years I've discovered is most political novels are frankly, well, I want to use a four-letter word beginning with S, but I'll just say aren't really very accurate. And what I wanted to do was attempt at least to write a political novel in a fantasy setting where the politics followed what really happens in politics, and try and make it both interesting and intriguing, along with empaths and isolates on top of it. And that's basically why I did it that way. And I mean, I've given a great deal of thought to the political background in the sense that it's not a ripoff or even an adaptation of any political system in the world today. It's a unique political system. It's one I think from practice that would actually work, but it would be very foreign to a lot of politicians in this country because it forces compromise. And it's constitutionally set up so you can't get around forcing compromise. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, nothing controversial there. What about you, Marx?
Yeah, so when I worked on my MFA program at Seton Hill, this was kind of the topic I wanted to tackle. I did a lot of short stories too, but I've always loved urban fantasy, watching and reading, and I just kind of wanted to play around with that, but also play around with a lot of different species and archetypes, but also put a different spin on it. And with my filmmaking background, I also have like a fight choreography. I'm a martial artist too and stuff. And so I wanted to put a lot of cool fight scenes as best I can. And I wanted to blend together a few things that I like to do in script writing that I don't see as often in books, but then with the strengths of books, right? Like first person POV, you can't get that in film. So that's why I wanted to make kind of a cinematic story. I wanted to make it an ensemble cast in a way, and play around with that story. Do stuff that's a little different, like I know there are some espionage type urban fantasy blends out there, but I don't read a whole lot. Maybe some of you have them, but I don't read a lot of urban fantasy that jump into other POVs as much. I know there are, like Christopher Farnsworth, there's other people, but usually it's like Dresden Files, where you follow one person, which I love. But I just wanted to jump around and explore the world more by being able to jump into other minds. So that's why I made some of these choices with this series.
So since you're also writing it along with Kindle Vella and launching it through kind of that release platform, is that also shaping how you're doing the writing the book?
A little bit. I mean, I already wrote the first draft. So this allows me to go back through and because it was a pretty large book. Like, I mean, urban fantasy usually isn't too large. This is like 130,000 words or so, which is pretty like getting in the epic fantasy range. So this allows me to chapter by chapter, section by section, kind of re-examine it, revise, polish, and compress it down a little bit more. And it's kind of neat actually being able to take it chunk by chunk like that. It gives me these micro deadlines I have to meet. And then it's also cool to get feedback and see what people resonate towards. Like, I didn't realize so many people love the cat on the cover. And so now I got to do more cat stuff.
What about you, David?
So like Marx, I really love urban fantasy. It's such a fantastic genre. It's very dynamic, but I could never find a character like me, especially with a rural background, who's gay, who comes from a place of poverty or food insecurity. And there's this genre I love, but as much as I read dozens and dozens of books, I just never saw myself. And I hadn't had much luck trying to sell an epic fantasy, though I have written several. So I started writing something just for myself, something that I would love. And that was White Trash Warlock. and it ended up being really kind of commercial, which was funny because I thought it was just going to be, oh, I'll put it online for free, or maybe on Wattpad or something, and maybe people will like it. It'll be a nice giveaway. But the more I got into it, I started taking more of my background growing up in a trailer in the woods in Oklahoma, being a high school dropout, the things that I dealt with, and weaving it into the urban fantasy story. So while a lot of UF is really powerful magicians throwing fireballs or, being very, very kick-ass, as it were, Adam's not like that. He's pretty low power on the totem pole when it comes to magic. And that means that he has to be very cautious because he's contending with beings that are far, far, far more godlike than him all the time. He's not a tough guy, and he knows it. He knows kind of his place in the magical spectrum, but he also is a hero. He's a good person, and that means that he'll do the right thing even when it's really tough for him to do so. And he does occasionally get just a little bit cocky, which gets him into trouble, particularly in the first book when he saves a life and ends up utterly upending everything that he kind of knows and changing the world a little bit. But I do, or changing his world a little bit, I should say. So I really love UF, but I wanted something a bit different. I also wanted something a little bit darker from a background, or a little deeper. So I delve into family abuse. I delve into some of the things that Adam dealt with growing up, that I dealt with, or my family dealt with. So while it's got some of those action moment notes, and it's got some of those really cool magic and fun spirit realm elements, it also has a whole family narrative that's resonating with a lot of readers. So that's kind of where White Trash Warlock came from. Is I love UF, but I wanted something that was a slightly different flavor and something that I could relate to from where I come from.
What about you, Janet?
I kind of have to agree with the guys. I started out with this as something for myself. It was really my way of dealing with last year and all the things that we can't mention that happened. And the team on here, they're Black Ops monster hunters, but their monsters are all biological. There's no supernatural in this world. There are Wendigos and Chupacabra. They're vampires, but they are all part of this natural biome. They're part of the flora and fauna. Or, it is an experiment that has gone wrong and gotten out of the lab. So I had a really good time playing with that and flipping tropes around, since the team is 3/4 female, and they find the hero and they drag him back to the camp and rescue him instead of the other way around.
Marie?
Well, the Realm series started with just an interest in the afterlife. I mean, to be put plainly, as a psychological horror author, I don't necessarily shy away from blood and gore, but it's not the thing that I go to first when I'm writing. And so my writing sometimes sets me into a mood of thinking about life. And then you sit and you think and you go down the rabbit hole and you realize you've done nothing but guess about things. So you might as well write some of these guesses down. And once you write it down, you kind of see the story forming in front of you. So the Realm began with questions of what if everything, all the religions that ever existed, are just a little off in terms of what their thoughts are. And what if that was really true? And what if some of the more terrifying aspects of what could happen really do happen? What would a character do then? So I really played a lot with the what if mindset, that's one of the questions we're always taught to ask as writers, right? I mean, to form our characters. And Marx, I have a background in film, and that was part of my MFA. I talked about, the what if you will. And so it was fun. It's kind of interesting to have that common ground with you, because that's kind of where I went. I said, what if this happened? And then I answered that question. So then what if this happened? Then I answered that question. No, throw this in. Oh, cool. Hey, you love vampires. Toss them in. Yeah. And so I did. And what happens, right? And so the what if, I was as excited to see what happened when my characters encountered these things as, they on the page were, if you will. So, I mean, again, as you can tell, as you probably can tell, at least I'm a pantser. So this was invigorating for me. So yeah, it started from that one question, but then it grew into this sort of, just, I don't know, search and answer kind of existential, what's happening in the world and life and what does it mean? I mean, I really did have that moment, which is kind of curious when you think about it, but hey, it happened. and we are 2 books in now, so.
And 2 books in, have you found any answers?
No, of course not. There is no answer. And that's the beauty of it. I think but that allows me for more what ifs, and that's the fun part. So as a writer, I'm okay with there not being an answer yet. It just gives me more questions.
What about you, Nancy?
Unmute. You'd think I would be able to do that by now. Actually, the genesis for this novel came from me living in Yorkshire. My husband is British, and when we first got married, we lived for 2 years in West Yorkshire. And so as I was walking around, I was taking note of course, all of the history and everything that we do have here in this country, but it's a little different. And so I'm looking at all these things and I'm imagining, people in carriages darting off here and gas lamps there instead of these air streetlights and all these kind of things. So I think that's where it really started. But I have a really good friend who is my sewing partner, works with me at the Ren Fest. And she just said one day, you need to write a book about your dogs. And I started thinking back about being in Yorkshire, and we were due for another visit. So while I was over there, I started doing a little more research and started really honing in on the part of the country that I wanted to write about, which was the part I lived in because I knew it best. We didn't have a car when we lived there. So I have walked all of these streets that Lucy and Annie, my characters, have walked. I've ridden these rails that they ride. I've done all that stuff, but I just kind of started thinking about the Strid because it just creeps the living daylights out of me. I mean, the thought of you're walking across this little stream and suddenly it goes down. I mean, I don't even know that they know how deep it goes took a couple of visits out there. I've actually crossed the river on very shaky little stones and looked down into the water and seen the scary bits. And it just came to me, what if that is how our 2 realms connect? Because this book started as this huge project with all these things like changelings and fairy hounds and all this cast of characters, and everybody had all their dogs and all this, and it just very quickly got unmanageable. So after about 3 years of just kind of staring at it and going, no, I've got other projects. Finally, I got back to this and I just cut it down to just those 2. I can always introduce everybody else later. It's fine. And I figured I would let them figure out how the fairies got into, it's not really Victorian, it's kind of Victorian Edwardian because it's right on the turn of the century. But how did they get there and what kind of mischief are they up to? But I see as when I was revising and as I'm talking to people about it, I start having to really rein myself in and not go. And this one time I went to Ingro and it was great. And we rode the train. I took my greyhound with me and she was fascinated. And they had this display and it was like the railway children every which way. I mean, I could talk about West Yorkshire for days and days and days. And we only lived there 2 years. And I have a very good research partner in my husband because he lived there his entire life. So Strid finally got narrowed down to just one of the many stories that was coming out of all of these memories and all these just basic daydreams that I had when I was waiting on a train or when I was sitting in our house because I was off and Simon had to work. And we lived in a Victorian row house, which, funny story, I can't pronounce the type of house it is a past tense of the word terrace, as in a terrace that you sit on. But when I say it with my lovely Georgia and South Carolina accent, it comes out like terrace. So that's fun. We lived in a terrace property, which was the same age as the characters in the book. So just loads and loads of research just waiting for me to take advantage of it. And I wasted a lot of that time writing a lot of fairies and elves that live in trees and fantasy worlds. And finally made my way back to West Yorkshire and Keighley, which is the name of the town where we lived, in Ingro, which is the village. So that's kind of how all of that came about. The what if, I like that you said that. That's what we're all trying to do. It's the what if fairies turned up in the park in Keighley where I walk my dog, what would happen?
So here's going to be the fun question. If you've got somebody out there who's either a reader that loves to hear about the stuff, or even somebody that's thinking about writing in some of these spaces. It is, of course, that time of year where the veil becomes thinnest. And, for all of us types, it's Halloween. I mean, what better time of year could there possibly be? We love writing and playing with these stories, pulling in fantastical creatures and magical abilities and powers and all these different sorts of things. What is it that you guys see in those powers, those abilities, these creatures, all the rest of these things that you're doing that attracts you to want to write in this particular space? And, also, because a lot of the time we use these things allegorically to talk about, we'll use some of these creatures or powers or different relationships that come in. So what is it that attracts you guys into urban fantasy or horror or, science fiction, these spaces where we're really playing with these different topics? Who wants to take that one first?
I can start. I unmuted myself. It was like a buzzer. I hit the buzzer. But I think that because it's all unknown and we can make it up, that's what we want to do in the first place, is create and entertain. So we get to make up the rules. So by not knowing, what that shadow is, or if it's really a shadow if it's just a shadow of something in the corner, or if there's something in the corner, we can create whatever we want there. And if we decide that we just want to make it, a physical being that they see, or if it's a feeling, or if it's just a play on the light, it's up to us. And when that's really, if you think about that, it's a truly heady concept. I mean, it's like, I've got the power to, control someone, because if someone who reads my work is afraid of ghosts, they're not going to sleep well after they just read the thing I just mentioned, right? And so now I've controlled someone's, the trajectory of their day, whatever. And I laugh, but it's true. It's true. We write these stories so we can affect the readers and have an impact. And we hope that they're enjoying themselves. I don't want to scare someone to the point where they can't sleep, but I absolutely want to have them. A little bit, maybe a little. Okay, all right. All right.
We all know you want to, disturb their sleep as much as humanly possible.
A little. But the point is, I want to entertain them. I enjoy doing it myself, so I'm actually entertained by writing it. And it's the what if, the unknown, I don't know the answer, but what if that were the truth? That kind of, the street looks normal, but that kind of thing. And it's great to be able to do all year round. It doesn't have to be October for me to get to that point. I feel that way in January. So it's just the way it is. But I think that for all of us, we're creating something that doesn't necessarily exist in true form, but we're going to make you wonder if maybe it really did. And that's the fun of it.
I wanted to jump in just really quick and say that I agreed with, I think it was David and Janet both, that said that they pulled from their own experience for this. And I think a lot of the reason that I have a rift between two worlds is because I was feeling very torn when I lived in England, that I wasn't home because I wasn't here. And the trajectory of the book is that you go to wherever it is you're wanting to go so badly. You go dive into the gorge, or you fly back to South Carolina, and it's not the same as it was. So I think that's something that we also kind of look at as when we do our what if. It's like, okay, we've got a what if. Now this is what it is. So what are you going to do with it? Are you going to sleep? Are you going to have bad dreams? Or, that kind of thing. That just popped into my head while you were talking.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lee.
People have been talking about power so far, and that's probably the underlying theme of pretty much everything that I write. But I guess I'm more of a fan of what I would call the quiet horror. You look at the surface of the worlds that I create, and they don't look that strange. Yes, I've got empaths or isolates in this story, or I've got chaos magic in another story. But people are people. But if you start looking behind it and at the corners, I show what power does, how it's used, how it's twisted in ways that are both familiar and unfamiliar. And I guess maybe that's because everybody's talked about drawing from their background. Well, basically, I spent almost 30 years dealing with the aspects of power in politics and economics. And I've often found that the most horrifying stuff is the stuff that looks really normal on the surface.
Well, one of my favorite lines is, the worst monsters are usually people.
Well,
And
I
I-
say that all. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I say that all the time when it comes to people who say, the government or this corporation, or it's like these, these organizations, like they're just people, right? There's always people at the core of it. So I had somebody tell me once, both Mother Teresa and Hitler were human. We have within us the capability for both of those things, whether it's incredible good or incredible evil. Humanity is just humanity. And when we try to blame a vague institution and say, the corporation or they, it's just people. Somewhere are people taking actions or inactions that is driving these things. To me, that's where you have to be very careful with the idea of they as an enemy. So, there's somebody there. It's not, there's not a corporation, Evil Incorporated, that's just doing what it's doing, right? Somebody's turning those keys.
I think sometimes, though, when people get into the they mood, it's because they don't want to face the fact that there are people there. It's very easy to hate somebody or even glorify somebody if you don't think about the people there, because even the gods, if you will, have flaws. And often even the worst villains occasionally do something good.
Well,
And it's easier to look at something bad as being they did it. It's theirs. It's them. It's not me. It's not me. It's them.
Good point.
well, and I think there's one of the other truths is no one is intrinsically 100% evil. No one is intrinsically 100% good. And I think
work at both.
You can work at both. And I mean, it's finding that balance. And I mean, we all want to think we're the hero of our own story. We may be doing something that even we know inherently is not going to be received well, but there's a good reason for doing it, or what we perceive to be a good reason for doing it. And I think this is one of those things that when we look at science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, horror, these things where we see power amped up, be it gods, be it monsters that are more powerful than we are, be it political systems and institutions that have power in a very different sort of sense that gets presented. I think one of the things that we often get to see here is we get to point to that and think of it as embodying the they. And it's a really helpful mechanism to take and play the what if game of, what if I, like David's talking about the fact he's got somebody who's not heavily powered. He's got some magic. He's got some abilities, things that probably all of us would like to have a touch of, but he's still looking and facing that much bigger, big bad. And I think it gives us a lot of capability and range with that what if. Janet, you're playing with special ops, black ops, guys that are often doing the dirty job nobody wants to admit has to be done. How does that fit in your world?
I think that what I like about fantasy, especially urban fantasy, is that you do get to play with these things. You have all of this freedom to make up your own world and your own rules and then play inside of them. And it lets you take a different kind of look at things like gender roles, politics. You can play out what if scenarios that you won't get to do in the real world.
What about you,
Yeah.
Marx?
Yeah, so for me, urban fantasy, I like the sense of wonder and awe that something magical could be just around the corner, right? You just don't know about it. And then I think to speak on like what part of me I put into it is that like I'm Latinx and white, so I'm biracial. And so like I have a character who's like that. And then I have another character who's, from Colombia. And then I have, lots of white characters and stuff that are mixed. So I tried to show some of the diversity, and then I focus a lot on, or there's a layer in there. I don't want to make it sound like it's super heavy, but there's a layer in there where I have where there's a tension between, even though the humans that are in the know, there's a tension between humans and these other worlders who have become trapped here. So, and for example, there's a scene where some beings come across, get trapped, or like refugees basically trying to escape from this world, and then they're not protected by any of the peace treaty. So they get like sold into slavery, and then they got to rescue them, all this stuff. So some of those scenes, even though they're, you know, fictional fantasy beings and stuff, a lot of critique partners really said they resonate with them, how emotional it was to see that layer of, you know, of something that's relatable in a way with refugees, immigration, you know, and race with different species. And so I layered that aspect into it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's like a gazillion martial art fights and explosions and stuff in the mix, but that's something I bring to it that at least is from my point of view of the world.
I love that balance you're going for there. That's a lot of why I wrote Adam the way that I did. I get, you know, there are so many books that when you have a gay male character, it's about coming out or AIDS, right? That's the story. That's the only story we get to have. That's not the story I wanted to tell. Adam's sexuality is like his eye color, or like my eye color. I don't stop 100 times a day and go, I have blue eyes, right? It just doesn't occur to me. And I like that it's a part of him and part of his character, but it's not something that, it's not the story. This is an urban fantasy story with a lot of action and a lot of humor and some darker, more interesting elements where the main character happens to be gay. It's not about him being gay. And that's something I can't read enough of. I can't find a fantasy with that aspect, right? I don't want, you know, that to be the tale that I'm reading. So that's why I write what I write.
David, I run into that sometimes as well, just in that African-American characters are expected to have a specific, I don't want to call it an agenda, but that's the word I'm going to say, you know, and that's not the way that I write. It's just the character is African-American. Okay. Again, like you said, my eyes are brown. I don't think about that either. You know, I like to say that, you know, we all have similar experiences in a neighborhood, you know, so everyone here goes to the same gas stations. There's like 3 right near our neighborhood. There's a grocery store. That's the experience. We all live here, right? So it doesn't matter. Racial makeup doesn't change what gas station we went to. That's the closest one. So we just all go to it. And that's the experience that I try to write with. But I'm an African-American author, and take that for what it is. You know, I don't know, that doesn't need to be, it's not the defining thing about the book. You know, the character, I'm Black, the character could be, it depends upon what I'm writing, but you know, I've had Black protagonists, I've had protagonists that you don't know, because literally it's not even about that. It's just about the guy saw the vamp, you know, a zombie chased down this woman. Like literally, who cares about what race she is at that moment?
There's a zombie. That's what's a factor here. I'm not, you know, oh man, we could have a whole panel just on this, but yeah.
Definitely we could. And I think that that's an important part about, maybe because, I mean, we write genre fiction, right? So we're writing stuff that we're interested in reading, and we're presenting it in a way that we would like to see it presented. You know, now that's not to knock anyone who writes an African-American protagonist and is serious about that. And there's some focal points that are important about that protagonist being African-American. That's what they wrote. That's not what I wrote. There's room for both. And I'm not seeing what I write in, you know, it's not prevalent. So when you said that, David, I couldn't agree more. I mean, absolutely, I'm trying to write the things I definitely would like to read.
Well, you don't want to, and I'm guessing because I don't want to have to perform my gayness, right? I don't want to have to perform that as, I don't know why I'm like really on this tonight. And I'm guessing you probably don't want to have to perform your Blackness, right? Like that's not what I'm here to write.
No, not right. Exactly. I mean, it's like, okay, and my name is also Lisa. I don't know what are we talking about? You know what I mean? I just don't know why that's a point. It's not the point. And I'd love to see us all at some point, you know, like in 10 years, I'd hate to have this conversation again. You know, I'd like to see that the landscape has changed so that we're just reading books written by, it doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't matter, the character, okay, that's a characteristic. If it doesn't have to be the focal point, that, I don't know. I'm hoping that in 10 years, that's not the discussion.
I agree with you completely. And I'll just kind of end my thought on my first goal is to entertain my reader.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can make you laugh. Hopefully I can make you escape reality for a little bit. But again, that's my first and main driver. So yeah, everything you just said.
So I'm gonna throw one more out there. What's one thing as you were going through, whether you were doing the research, whether it was the writing, what is the one thing when you were doing this book that came out and sort of popped you and said, where'd that come from? Or surprised you, or the thing that you were just like, oh yeah, this is it. I still don't know where it come from, but this is gonna be fun. What's the one thing that, it may have shocked you, it may have surprised you, or you just love the idea of? And keep it spoilers free if you want, but take all the fun out of it. So, all right, David, you're first.
I'm really excited about this. So being a high school dropout, I've gone on and got 3 college degrees because I felt like I had to make up for it. And one of those is in history. So I weave a lot of local history, but whether it's back in Guthrie or here in Denver, into my story. Now, one of the things that happens to Adam, it's not really a big spoiler, is when his powers kicked in and his sight started occurring, his family put him into an institution because they thought he was mentally ill. And that predicated him dropping out of high school. He was too out of touch with reality. I called that place Liberty House because I grew up near Lake Liberty in Guthrie, and it made sense to me. Plus, I like the idea of an institution being called Liberty House, kind of ironic. And everything that happens there, there's a lot of motivations that I won't spoil. A couple of years ago, as we were getting ready to publish White Trash Warlock, it had already gone to the printer. The book was done in the can, as it were. I was researching Trailer Park Trickster because we're going to go back to Guthrie, and most of my memories from there are from my childhood. So they're a little dated, and I'm like, I need to refresh. And I came across a place called Dominion House, which is now a bed and breakfast wedding destination that also happens to be considered one of the most haunted places in America because it used to be a sanitarium and a school for boys. And at one point it was, they found a lot of children's bodies in the basement. It has this very dark history. I was like, is my own book messing with me at this point? So that was something where I really had to get into this place and research it further. And if I can ever get back there with time, I'm going to stay there because, I mean, come on. I thought I created it and it had existed the entire time with a different name.
All right, Janet, I'll call you out for that one.
All right. I started writing this, like I said, for myself. It was something to do last year. Writers, we write our therapy. And so it started out with, like fun stuff. There's explosions, guns, kissing booth jokes, good stuff like that. And the next thing that I know when I'm reading back through the final draft, it kind of touched on a world in upheaval. That here's this military force, but they were not culled from like the Army, the Navy, Rangers or whatever. These were children that were brought in like as infants and trained to do this. And most of them came from places in the world that had problems with ongoing crime, war. Certain genders just weren't valued at all. So it got a lot deeper than I intended.
Lisa?
Well, I mean, I was thinking of so the thing that hit me was how funny the main character in this one. Well, like I mentioned, there's this battle to try and save the family from ending up in this horrible realm, if you will. So the person they're trying to save in this book, in book 2, is Gabby. Now, Gabby is the granddaughter and the daughter to the 2 who are already up there. And Gabby has 2 young children, one in diapers and one toddler, and she's going through the, don't touch this, stop touching this, don't be quiet, oh my God, what's going on, blah, 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 right? All that stuff. And one day I read it. I just read through a scene. And I'm like, nah, I just really recounted a scene that happened in my life. It was a while ago, but it happened. And it was clear. It was like a distinct memory. I'm like, I better change that because honestly, because it was direct. But it was that moment of, everybody stop touching stuff or we're getting out of here. And I literally don't care what you think of it. We're going to leave right now. Everyone's mother has said that. Do it again and we're leaving now. And I literally have said that and I wrote it and I said, okay, all right. Now, like, that's too much of reality in the book. We all write from our own perspective, but that was literally recounting a memory in full. So what I think I learned from that, though, is not just, we all know that we're putting ourselves into our characters. There's always a little bit of something in us, in each character we create, whether it's, good or bad, doesn't matter. It's just a piece of something. But like that, apparently, there's those moments of like when you just want to get the thing done and you've got two little people not trying to help you with that. That I moved on from there. We're not at that stage any longer, but it definitely had an impact. And it struck me, how much of your life comes out in your writing and how cathartic it is. Because I didn't even know that frustrated me so badly. I thought that was like a moment in time. No, that apparently stuck. And I think that's amazing because it helped me to build Gabby. Gabby is fleshed out very differently than I would have fleshed her out before if I had not experienced that, and I'm grateful for it. It was interesting, and it was sort of an eye opener, and one that it was totally unexpected because the scene, it's not a throwaway scene. It sets up her character, of course, but it's not the heavy hitting scene. Nothing happens in there. There's babies in the scene. Of course, nothing happens in there, right? But but everything happens in there. Now we see who Gabby is. She's this mom at this stage of life that is, frazzled, irritated, tired, ready to go, still has work to do, still has lunch to make, still one of the back cover copy has washing sand out of somebody's hair. Yeah, that was my life, and it's cool to kind of see myself write that out without even, I didn't tell myself I was going to do it. It just happened and it was there. That was kind of neat.
About you, Nancy?
I bet you thought it was going to be really spooky and scary. Did you know that was a nice,
nice
one, right?
No, I thought you were going to talk about the time. Never mind. I'm going to be there.
You know too much.
Mine is a silly little thing, and it's all because I have spent a lot of my life, as I think a lot of us who are female have done, telling myself that the teachers were right when they said that I wasn't going to be good in science. You need to look at history, look at writing. You'll do better in that. Well, in this thing, I had to figure out how she was going to put together a gun that would shoot out electricity, a rope of electricity, and wrap around somebody like Wonder Woman, because child of the 70s, but it doesn't make him tell the truth, kind of kills him. Anyway, I had to figure out how to say that in the book and how to explain how that worked without really explaining how it worked, because this is not a physics textbook, and they were right about me in terms of science. But the fact that I figured all this out and then I sent it to a friend of mine who is very knowledgeable about electricity and physics and engineering and all these kind of things, and he went, yeah. And I said, oh, okay, thanks. And hung up the phone and went, yes, I did it. I figured out science. So that was my one little, and I actually took that portion, this real quick cut, little story. I took that portion to a first pages read at a writer's conference, thinking that the same thing was going to happen, that they were all going to be like, oh, that's precious. Look at you. You speak sign language. Why are you trying to talk about electricity? And that was the part that they liked. Some of the other descriptions and stuff, and all this other stuff that I worked so hard on, and my English teacher mother would have been so proud. They were just kind of discarding that and going, wow, that gun's really cool. So that was my exciting moment with this book. I did science, sort of.
What about you, Lee?
I can't say that with the Isolate books or the Empire of Gold books, I can't say there was any one thing. I'm always surprised. There are always a bunch of little things that come up, and like both of the ladies, I've been threw a lot of things out, and I'm thinking, oh, that's sort of a rehash of what happened when such and such happened in my background in politics. And I never even thought of it in those terms. But it's always there. And the other thing is the title of the book is Isolate. And that is what the main character happens to be. But it's sort of ironic because in a lot of ways I grew up as an isolate. I've managed to mask it pretty well, but I am frankly borderline Asperger's. And one of the things that shows up occasionally is if you catch me off guard and ask me a question, if I'm really caught off guard, I will answer it honestly, truthfully, and in great detail, whether you want to hear it or not. And that resulted in my being fairly isolated in my younger years, even among the midst of people. So I suppose that's one of the things that cropped up.
Well, we always find ourselves in our writing. What about you, Marx?
So there are lots of little surprises because I do outline in advance, but I do kind of pants a little bit of parts of the scene, especially as when I introduce new characters. So I actually created a new character, like an episode comes up this tomorrow or this week. I'm not sure when this airs, but coming up soon. It's a brand new character, just like a voice popped out and I'm like, oh, who's this character? And I just started making up this new character. So that, and then like I mentioned the cat on the cover, that cat's modeled after one of our cats, Scout, who got sick and passed away actually during the book, writing it. And you know, that character gets introduced in this next episode too, but also that character takes a very unique twist and turn that I never expected. And a lot of people like that character. So I have to use that character more now. So it's nice. It's its own character. It's different than Scout, but it is a kind of it's something to remember Scout by also, which is cool. But yeah, I think a lot of people here, a lot of you, a little more pieces of me in my life kind of work their way in. And I think that's really important. The more I write, the more I feel that's important to find your voice. I like AIs, you know, they have writing AIs right now. And I think one thing that an author will always have is we have our unique experience, our human experience. And an AI can't ever do, they can try to copy one if you have enough material, but they can't ever make it their own experience. Maybe if it's about AI, but that's something really unique. And it's kind of cool to find those things and even a little therapeutic, I guess, too.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming to hang out with us this evening. But before we get out of here, I'm going to go around and let everybody know where to find you, social media, websites, all that kind of cool stuff, and where they can get that latest release, because people are going to have to go load up their bookshelves in their to-be-read pile. So, Nancy, we'll start with you.
I am at nancyedunne.com because I don't have any imagination when it comes to naming my website. And that was easy for me to remember. I figured it'd be easy for other people to remember. This is on Amazon. It will be out. It's in pre-order right now for Kindle. It will be out in Kindle and paperback on October the 27th. And hopefully hardback shortly after that. I'm playing with this new hardback thing, so we'll see how that goes. But nancyedunne.com, that's me.
What about you, Lee?
Like Nancy, I don't do too much social media. I don't do Facebook or that. I do have a website, and like Nancy, I don't have any imagination. It's lemodesittjr.com. The new book is called Isolate, and its current drop date is now November 16th, and it will be available in everything: audio, ebook, And hardcover right now, you have to wait a year for the paperback. And you can find it pretty much anywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Abe Books Powell, Audible for the audiobook. So that's what's where.
Marx?
Find me at marxpyle.com. Also not very creative. And you can also find me on Twitter at Mr. Marx, slightly more creative maybe. And then Obsidian Monsters, you can find on Kindle currently. There's 10 episodes in so far, at least one episode every week coming out. And you search Obsidian Monsters, my name, you should find it. Kindle is not very good about their search thing, but you'll find it that way for sure. And also, if you just want to hear my voice for some reason, hopefully it's slightly more coherent, you can find me over at Genretainment, where I interview different guests. So,
David?
So like everyone else, my website is basically my name, or you can just Google me, David Slayton. Don't forget the Y. David R. Slayton is very helpful. You want to remember the R. There are a lot more David Slaytons in the world than I ever knew when I started publishing and writing. So if you don't get the R, you will find some Florida man types and an attorney general in Texas that Texas keeps tagging me on Facebook with. I am all over social media, so just David R. Slayton. I love to connect with readers. You can find both of my books pretty much anywhere, your local indie, Amazon, Audible. So I'm on all platforms. So just David R. Slayton, like the Pirates.
Embrace the Florida man marketing. Just embrace the Florida man marketing. Janet?
I am Janet Walden-West everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, author page, all of that good stuff. Mostly I hang out on Twitter, so you can always find me there. And Agent Down just came out this month, and it is Kindle Unlimited, and paperback right now.
And Lisa?
Well, I think we all took the same class about URLs and everything. So I'm elmarywood.com.
This is a first.
I just think, I don't know, it's a branding thing, or we just all took, I don't know, we spent our creativity in our novels. That's what it is. So the URLs, elmarywood.com. You can find me on Twitter as elmarywood1 and on Facebook as elmarywood. The Realm 2, which is Cacophony, or let me say that differently, Cacophony, book 2 of the Realm, will be out tomorrow, which is exciting, and you can get that anywhere books are sold. I've been told to say it that way.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening. I'm Jim Nettles, and I went to the same school of, you can find me at jamesbnettles.com, but of course I've got to break the norm. You can also find me at authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, and of course here at ConTinual. Occasionally they'll let me out from behind my little cage. So I want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out with us this evening, and we will see you again soon. And if you've had fun with us, of course, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, and go buy some books. We'll see y'all soon.